Thank you for joining us for another vaccine update. I'm here joined by Scott Peterson. So let me begin with an update about the vaccine. So what you see on the screen is a pictorial representation of the virus. This is the SARS coronavirus, which is the one that's causing the disease COVID-19. So in that picture, you see it's shaped like a sphere with many red protruding spikes. And that's how this virus gets into the human cell. It attaches to receptors on our human cell through that spike and then gets in and then makes copies of itself and then causes disease. Inside that sphere, you'll see the genetic material of that virus. It's a little spiral. It's called RNA. Our genetic material is called DNA. So that's how we know who we are, and that's what shapes us. So this RNA that you see inside, there's a part of it that's colored red, and that's the part that codes for the spike protein. And as you will see, the vaccines target the spike protein, because once you attack and neutralize the spike protein, the virus is rendered harmless. So for comparison, here are 4 vaccines. The 2 in the middle are the Moderna and the Pfizer BioNtech that have received emergency use authorization by the Food and Drug Administration. So those 2 require 2 doses, are 95% effective, and the difference is the Moderna requires minus 20 degrees Celsius storage, which means freezer temperatures, and the Pfizer BioNtech requires minus 70 degrees Celsius, so Arctic range temperatures, ultra cold storage, very special requirements which we have at the hospital, but most places don't. The other thing you'll notice also is that the other 2 vaccines, there for comparison, the Oxford University AstraZeneca and the Russian Gamaleya, are also approved but not in the United States. And those 2 also require 2 doses, are about 90% effective, and require regular fridge storage temperatures. So how does this work? Let's look at this picture starting from the left side. You see that little spiral? That's the mRNA, or messenger RNA. It's called the messenger because it carries a code for a specific protein, in this case the spike protein that you saw in the first picture of the virus. So what's in this injection that you're seeing in that picture is just a small snippet of RNA called the messenger RNA, and it's very fragile. That's why we need these low temperatures to store it. Additionally, it's protected by a fat droplet, so it comes inside a fat droplet, an oily droplet, and that's what this vaccine is. There's no preservatives, there's none of the other things that people are concerned about, like mercury or thimerosal or eggs or any of that stuff, no latex. So it's a very simple components, just the messenger RNA and the lipid droplet, which is why its safety is so good. So as you can see, the injection, once injected into the muscle in the arm there, in that first human figure on the left, the messenger RNA enters the human cell. In the second figure, you can see once it enters the cell naturally decodes this RNA, the messenger, and creates a specific protein, the spike protein. It's golden in color there. And this is kind of natural. All plants and all animals have messenger RNA, is the only way they can make proteins. They use the message, the code. So once made, this protein is immediately recognized by the human immune system as being not human. So once it recognizes this as not human, the immune mechanism goes into action and creates antibodies. And these are very specific targeted antibodies. You see there in red, they're Y-shaped. And what they do is they're designed to attack specifically spike protein and neutralize it. So this person now is immunized. They received the vaccine, both doses, they're immunized. And such a person, when they encounter the virus in real life, the virus is unable to attach to their cells and unable to cause disease, because once it enters this body, the immunized person, the antibodies glom onto the spike protein, prevent the virus from attaching to the cells, prevent it from entering the cell, prevent it from multiplying in the body, and therefore unable to cause disease. And this is how this vaccine is 95% effective in preventing disease. So let's take a look at the timeline to develop any vaccine. And this gives you an idea. A question commonly asked is, was this vaccine rushed? How come we got this vaccine so quickly? I'll explain that, and it's important to understand this. So starting from the left side, every vaccine initially, they have to understand from their preclinical research what kind of vaccine are they going to make. In this case, they decided to target the spike protein. And the important thing here is the prototype for developing an mRNA or messenger RNA vaccine was in the works for about 10 years prior to this. So they were developing this technology but didn't have a target until January of 2020, when in China, in Wuhan, they discovered this virus and they published the genetic sequence. The Chinese researcher, she published this genetic sequence and put it out for the world to see in an open source format on GenBank, which is where these kinds of things are revealed. As soon as the sequence was published, both Moderna and BioNtech, Moderna in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and BioNtech in Mainz, Germany, the researchers immediately used that sequence to identify the sequence on the gene that codes for the spike protein and immediately went to work to create the vaccine. So that's how you cut almost 10 years of hard work. Once that was done, they studied the safety and the efficiency of the vaccine in animals, and that's in rats. And once they did that, they successfully proved it works in rats to prevent the disease. They then launched human trials, and there are several phases to human trials. Phase 1 trials, a small number of human volunteers, they look for safety. Once that was proven to be safe, they went to phase 2 human trials. What they do there is look at 100 or a little more than 100 volunteers to look for dosage that is safe. What's the dosage? And is it effective? Once that was established, they moved on to the most important trial for all vaccines called phase 3 human trials. In the phase 3 human trials, between Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech, there are a total of 74,000 healthy volunteers, humans, that were involved in these trials. So a large group of population of people. In those trials, they clearly showed not only is this very safe, both vaccines, but also both vaccines were 95% effective in preventing the disease. And we will see that in next slide. So let's start with the BioNTech vaccine. It's called Comirnaty or Tozanamaran. That's the pharmaceutical term for this vaccine. So this is the German vaccine developed by BioNTech in Mainz, Germany, and you see the results. This is the final results showing 95% protection for all participants. So if you were to take a room of 100 people and give them the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, and then they were subsequently, after successful immunization, they were exposed to COVID-19, 95 people will not get the disease at all. 5 people in that 100 will get the disease, but the good news is those 5 will get a very mild form of disease with no symptoms or very mild symptoms, and most importantly with no long-lasting lingering effects of the disease. So in a manner of speaking, researchers who have looked at this data independently, global experts, have concluded the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is 100% effective in preventing severe disease. So 95% in protecting all forms, mild, moderate, and severe disease. So the 5% unfortunate few who get the vaccine and get the disease are still protected from the severe form of the disease. So this is a very astonishing thing. Additionally, you can see on that slide, those greater than 55 years of age also had significant protection at 94%. And this is quite remarkable because that age group is the most vulnerable, is the one that has the biggest burden of the disease. In fact, 85% of all deaths in the United States, the 400,000 plus deaths that have occurred so far, 85% have occurred in the older than 65 age group. So this vaccine is effective even in that vulnerable group. This is a world map just showing all the countries that have independently reviewed the results, independently concluded that this is not only a safe vaccine, but an extremely effective vaccine. So most of North America, USA, Canada, Mexico, and then you can see South America, a lot of countries, including Argentina, Chile, Ecuador, and then all of Europe, pretty much Western Europe, 27 countries of EU, Great Britain or United Kingdom, Switzerland, and then you can see also countries all over the Middle East. And in Asia and the Pacific, you can see Australia, Papua New Guinea, Singapore, Malaysia. A lot of countries have clearly approved the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Now take a look at the other one that we're giving here. It's called the Moderna mRNA 1273. And again, the efficiency, the safety are extremely similar, comparable to the Pfizer-BioNTech. Honestly, there is no difference. Another question people always ask, would you have a preference? And I will answer this very honestly, there is no preference. Both are equally good, both are equally effective. And you can see here, 94.5% effective in all participants. And then, more importantly, those 65 and older, 100% effective in preventing disease. So let's look at DART findings. This is important. DART stands for Developmental and Reproductive Toxicity Studies, and these are trials to look for effects of the vaccine on pregnant women and then also in the development of the embryo, the fetus, and then after birth, the child. These kind of trials are not done on humans for ethical reasons. So they're done on animal models, in this case female rats, and Moderna's trial clearly showed with the dosages used that we use for humans that there was no effect on fertility, on female reproduction, on the pregnant rat, or on the fetus or the embryo in development, and also postnatal, in other words, after delivery, no developmental effects. And again, a world map to show all the countries that have recognized the safety and efficiency of Moderna vaccine. Again, Canada, United States, and Europe. You can see pretty much all the 27 EU nations, United Kingdom, Israel, and Switzerland. So let's look at some frequently asked questions. So if you had the infection, COVID-19, it's perfectly okay for you to get this. Even if you just recovered from it, it's okay. If you want to, you have the choice of waiting 90 days to let others get the vaccine, but that's your choice if you wanted to wait, because typically it takes 90 days for a reinfection to occur. And we'll talk a little more about that, but remember this, even if you got the infection, please take the vaccine. It's going to help you from reinfection, help you from infection from variants of this virus as well. And then messenger RNA, you always worry about RNA is a genetic material. Does it affect our genetic material, the DNA? And the truth is it cannot, because the DNA is isolated and sequestered and safe inside the nucleus. The nucleus is part of the cell that the RNA cannot enter. So this messenger RNA stays inside the cell but outside the nucleus. And at no point does the RNA come into contact with the DNA. Additionally, this messenger RNA, once it's translated in nature, this is a normal, it gets degraded in the cell. So it no longer exists after 2 days, roughly. So this disappears, this vaccine essentially disappears after it does its work in the cell. And if you're getting any vaccine, like a flu vaccine, a shingles vaccine, or any other, wait 14 days, wait 2 weeks before you get this COVID vaccine. And then if you've received treatments like plasma treatment or the IV infusion treatment, the monoclonal antibodies from Eli Lilly, like the bamlanivimab, or Regeneron cocktail antibodies, then you need to wait 90 days before you get this vaccine in order to make sure you get the full benefit. And no need to test for the virus before you get this vaccine. And neither of the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccines contain aborted fetal cells. I know this is a sensitive topic for folks that are concerned about the ethical nature of making these vaccines. The good news is these were done in an ethical manner. There were no fetal cell lines during development or production phases of this vaccine. So that's the good news. And these vaccines do not cause Bell's palsy, a common question asked because there were 5 cases reported in that large trials that were conducted. None of them were directly related to the vaccine. And these are incidental illnesses, and we'll talk a little bit more in a later slide. The one other point is about allergies. If you're allergic to polyethylene glycol, or PEG, It's the common word. You may not know this, but this is a common ingredient of laxatives that we use when we use it for colonoscopy. So folks that undergo colonoscopy have to undergo a bowel preparation to clean out their bowels. That laxative contains polyethylene glycol. Rarely people develop allergies. So you would know this because your doctor or your medical chart would know this, and if you had a reaction to this, they would document that. So unless you have a reaction to polyethylene glycol or PEG, there's no other reason for not getting this vaccine. That's the only time you should not get the vaccine. And transmission is commonly asked question. So if I got the vaccine, I finished my 2 doses, I'm 14 days outside my second dose, after my second dose, am I able to transmit the disease? The question is, you do not transmit. You can prevent transmission. The answer is mostly yes. The evidence is not completely there because there have not been done any trials. But here are 3 reasons to reassure you. Even after 1 dose, the vaccine protects you. But do complete the second dose because you're only partly protected after the dose 1, anywhere from 50 to 70% protection after dose 1. After dose 2, 14 days after dose 2, you're at 95% protection. So make sure you get your second dose. And then population studies have shown that people who are not symptomatic, in other words, who don't show symptoms, are less likely to transmit the disease. So even if after the vaccine you are asymptomatic, you're still good. And finally, we know from all other previous vaccines, that protect not only against the disease, but also in the transmission. So they stop transmission like influenza vaccine. So similarly, we assume that this vaccines will do the same. Okay, pregnancy, a common, an important question. So the CDC, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, all 3 organizations recommend that we offer this. So that's not the same as saying they recommend the vaccine. So I'll make that difference in a bit. So the CDC worries about public health, so it worries about large-scale public health impacts. The American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology is concerned about risks to mother. And the Society for Maternal and Fetal Medicine looks for fetal-related problems. All 3 agreeing is rare, so they truly believe that the risks and benefits and ratio based on that this should be offered. So if you look at the World Health Organization's report, it's called the SAGE report. That's their advisory group, is called SAGE. Their recommendation is, they say it in a different way, but it comes to the same. They say not to offer this to pregnant women unless the risk-benefit ratio supports it. So this, the same way of saying this, the ACOG, CDC, and SMFM say it differently. They say it should be offered, and that they should make the decision in a shared decision-making manner, looking at risks and benefits. So what are the risks? Let's look at the risks. Number 1, if you're pregnant and you get the disease versus someone who is pregnant and did not get the disease, you will be more at risk for respiratory complications. In other words, you will end up in the ICU more likely than someone who did not get the disease and will require mechanical ventilation. So that's one risk. Second risk is premature birth. More likely in pregnant women who have the disease of COVID-19 than in pregnant women who don't. So those are the kind of the risks. Additionally, pregnant women might have comorbid conditions like high blood pressure and diabetes, and those folks are also at increased risk. So in a situation where you're pregnant and you're wondering if you should get it, please have that discussion with your obstetrician or your pharmacist, and they will explain whether you're one of those folks that should take this. So it should always be offered, and then a discussion should ensue about risks and benefits. So the trials for pregnancy are never done initially, and that's just normal. No phase 3 human trials are ever done, including pregnant women. So the only time we do these trials is after the general population clearly shown that it's safe, it's effective, and that's what's happening. CDC has given $2 million to Health Partners Institute in Minnesota, who will be studying this over the next 5 years. So pediatrics, we were asked this question in the last forum. Are there any trials? Yes, there are, and you can see there are 4 trials. So the first one is Pfizer BioNtech. They're already fully enrolled, 2,259 adolescents between ages 12 and 15. Moderna is also doing its trial in the United States, ages 12 to 17. They have enrolled 3,000. They've completed enrollment, and they expect the results to be out September of this year. Oxford University AstraZeneca, which is the UK-Swiss collaboration, they're doing it ages 5 through 18. They're currently enrolling. They hope to complete enrollment February. Johnson & Johnson is also enrolling, and they're in the process as well. And you can see there at the bottom, I just gave you an idea, 13%. That's the total cumulative number of doses in the United States of pediatric cases of COVID-19. So it's not an insignificant amount. It's a fair amount, and what's more important is we need to get these trials and results soon, because there are some children that suffer a multi-inflammatory syndrome, and that's not a good thing. So these are the reasons why these trials are underway. Immunocompromised, question commonly asked: if you're immunocompromised, should I get? Again, it's similar to the pregnancy question. You should be offered it. And then there should be a shared decision-making conversation between you and your pharmacist or your physician. The physician might recommend that you should stop your immunosuppressant medications for a period of time, and it's always on a case-by-case individual basis. So the answer is yes, you should be offered it, and you should have the discussion before you decide that you will get it. Again, these are important things to remember, because immunocompromised folks are also at high risk. If they get COVID-19, they don't usually do well. So some of the conditions listed here, CDC considers immunocompromised: cancer, bone marrow transplant, solid organ transplant, stem cells for cancer treatment, genetic immune deficiencies, HIV, anyone on oral or IV steroids or other medications such as mycophenolate, sirolimus, cyclosporine, tacrolimus, etanercept, rituximab, or Rituxan. So there's several more. This is not 100% inclusive, just to give you an idea. So let's talk about incidental illnesses. I think this is important because it gives context. When you see in the news report someone died or someone had this or that condition and they got the vaccine just a day before or a week before, remember this, because this is important. And the CDC gets these adverse events reported to their VAERS system, and they individually look at each of these cases to make sure that there's no connection between vaccine and the disease. But this is the background. These are called background rates of occurrence of certain common illnesses. Let's look at them. So on an average day, the United States, they had 328 million people. Of that, 110 may develop Bell's palsy, which is a temporary paralysis of the face that resolves always. And then an additional 274 may develop Guillain-Barré syndrome, a form of paralysis. This also resolves, and this can be treated. Both of these conditions create a lot of fear and scare and anxiety, and that's kind of understandable. But remember that these occur regardless of what's going on. Additionally, every single day, unfortunately, people die unexpectedly. And then you also see incidences of strokes, heart attacks, seizures. All of these occur, at least at this point, based on the large 74,000 population-based studies of both vaccines. These are extremely safe. They do not cause any of these, what we call incidental illnesses. Allergies. Quick question here. Always people ask, if I have allergies. So the only allergic reaction that we are most concerned about is called a severe reaction. And another term for it is anaphylaxis. A severe reaction involves the entire body, usually is within 7 minutes of getting this, any vaccine in fact, you could develop theoretically. Annually, 5% of this country gets some form of anaphylaxis, usually to peanut butter or drugs or medications or vaccines. It's a not uncommon occurrence, but it's not very common either. So one thing I would say is, unless you develop an immediate allergic reaction to the vaccine, at that point you should not get the second dose. For other reactions like food allergies, pet allergies, venom allergies, environmental agent allergies, latex allergies, any oral medication allergies, those are not a reason to stop getting this. So please remember this. Get this vaccine despite any other allergies you might have. Of course, the one point I want to make before I go to this slide is if you're allergic to PEG, polyethylene glycol, and that's the only time you should not get the vaccine. So let's look at some rates of anaphylaxis, just so we get context to this, what's called a severe immediate allergic reaction. This is a whole body reaction easily treatable with an EpiPen or epinephrine injection. And all the cases that so far have occurred, we have been able to successfully treat in the country, in the United States. So as of January 19th, according to the CDC, there are a total of 31 cases, 10 for Moderna, 21 for the Pfizer BioNtech vaccine. So the initial estimated rates, remember the word initial, so the actual rate might end up being 1 in a million in the end. That's usually how it ends up. But because we don't have everyone vaccinated yet, the larger the number, the more true the number and rate will be. Rate is not a snapshot. Rate is, if you say every single person in the United States got the vaccine, what's the rate? So keeping that in mind, the initial rate, 2.5 people per million doses administered for Moderna, 11 cases per million doses administered for Pfizer BioNtech. Remember, this is a law of averages. Doesn't mean one is better or one is safer or one is worse. This is just law of averages. As the numbers keep rising, even as we speak currently, there is a preliminary report showing that the Pfizer BioNtech numbers are also going down. So these are initial rates, and these don't mean that one is better or safer. They're both equally safe. I want to stress that. Okay, and finally, adverse events. These are not severe reactions, just any adverse event reported to VAERS, which is our reporting system, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. That is 0.03%. So 100%, not 1%, not 0.1%, but 100% of folks are reporting adverse events. Okay, let's look at this in another way of putting the context to this. So Moderna, 2.5 anaphylactic reactions per million doses. Pfizer BioNtech currently 1 per 100,000 doses. Penicillin, that's daily given in this country, you get 1 per 5,000 doses of severe adverse events. So you can see the tremendous difference there. No one speaks, or the press doesn't put a headline saying penicillin allergic reaction, but they will with the new vaccines, and rightfully so. I'm not berating the press for doing that, but I want you folks to have a context when you see a headline such as that. And then contrast material given for imaging studies like CT scans. That occurs at a rate of 200 per million doses. So compared to all that, you can see how good the safety profile of both Moderna and the Pfizer BioNtech vaccine is. So anyone who has experienced this kind of anaphylactic reaction to these vaccines have completely recovered. There have been no anaphylaxis-related deaths, and additionally, no deaths related to vaccines so far reported that are directly tied to the vaccine itself. All right, let's quickly look at this slide. It's each column is a vaccine. So first column on the left is shingles vaccine, then there's the Pfizer BioNtech vaccine, then there's the flu vaccine, and finally saline injection. And you can see they all cause some form of local pain, redness, swelling, muscle aches, fatigue, headache, chills, fever, gastrointestinal symptoms like nausea and vomiting. But the safety profile is very good for the Pfizer BioNtech. You can see it's right in the middle there. Excellent safety profile. These reactions, I'm not going to downplay them. They're distressing to the person that's unfortunately undergoing it for a day or two, sometimes 3 days. But the first 2 days are the worst, and they get better after the third day, and they go away on their own. You don't need hospitalization for these kind of local reactions. But they are distressing nonetheless, and folks really feel miserable. They sometimes can't go to work, just have to lie in bed and feel very bad. They feel like they're having the worst form of flu. But remember, the benefits of taking the vaccine despite these reactions are you are protected 95% against a disease that affects not just the lungs, it affects the heart, the brain, the kidney, the liver, and additionally causes blood clots in your blood vessels all over the body. So this is not a benign disease. It leaves long-term and short-term effects, and of course, you know, it also causes death. So there's a 2-dose schedule for both of these. 21 days for the Pfizer BioNtech, 28 days for Moderna. So please, please complete your series. Do not take this lightly. You're not fully protected after dose 1. And you have a grace period, 4 days around this. So, 4 days before or after. So if that time is exceeded, no need to start over again. Just get your second dose. Don't worry too much. Try to stick to the schedule. When you get a reminder from one of our team, please respond and get your second dose. And if you're late, don't worry. Come in anyway. We'll give you the second dose. Okay, quick look at variants. People always talk about all these new variants people are reporting. There are 4 currently under, people are concerned about. Variants are changes to the virus. The virus is the same strain that started in Wuhan, China. It's just the exact same strain virus causes the same disease. It just has some changes in its genetic sequence. To give you an idea, there are 30,000 letters, let's call them, in the sequence. That's how many base pairs there are. These variants have less than 10 changes in their letters. So out of 30,000 in the genetic letters, there are only 10 letters that are changed. So let's look at these. On the right-hand side, you see an electron microscope picture or representation of the spike protein. This is where all the vaccines are targeting. And if you look at the lower right bottom, there are silhouettes of a human figure, and we're showing transmission among species. So from humans to canines or dogs to felines like the domestic cat and the lion. Also, it has been recorded with mustelids like minks and ferrets, and to rodents like mice and hamsters. So this kind of cross-species, humans to animals and back from animals to humans, creates changes. And you can see the yellow spots on the spike protein. Those are all the areas those changes have occurred because of this species to species transmission. Then you see the red spots are what the UK variant, the United Kingdom variant, those are the changes on spike protein. The blue spots are where the South African variant, the changes have occurred. And the magenta spots are those that have common features to both the UK and the South African variants. Now you can see on the spike protein all these different changes. Additionally, also different areas where this virus binds to the human cell. The good news is all the vaccines, including the Pfizer, the Moderna, the Oxford, the Johnson & Johnson, they attack multiple sites, not a single site. And so far, the best evidence out there, these vaccines are still very effective against these variants. All right, let's look at so far 21 million doses given in the United States. South Dakota is leading it. We should be proud of our state. A phenomenal job by the Department of Health of South Dakota and the health systems. Monument Health is living up to its mission to give doses as soon as we get them within the week to everyone that is designated by the state in a phased manner based on their risks. So thank you for your patience, but more importantly, we should be proud to call South Dakota our home, and Monument Health is there going along every single day, making sure we give those vaccines out. And you can see that percentage doses used, we're above 70% for the state. 7% of our state has been vaccinated, more than 7.5% of our state has been vaccinated. Additionally, 2.5% of vaccine recipients have completed their complete series. So they're fully immunized. That's quite impressive for the state of South Dakota. If you look, that's ranking in order. We are there at the very top. We are second in the 50 states.
So yes, I'm here to do the vaccination update for Monument Health. We've of course been working very diligently at getting out vaccines since December the 14th when we received our first vaccine. So we're about 6 weeks into this fight, and as Dr. Kura said, we feel that we're doing extremely well as Monument Health and then also as the state of South Dakota. So at the very beginning of this, in fact, a number of months before the vaccines were available, we were recruited along with Sanford and Avera to coordinate the efforts of vaccination inside of the state of South Dakota. So the 3 major health systems are stewards of the vaccine inside of the state. The state is ultimately in control of that vaccine. They are the ones that make the final decisions on who can be vaccinated, which phases we are in. It is our job as Monument Health to follow those. We do get some input along the way, but ultimately the state is the one that's making those decisions. The Department of Health is following the recommendations of ACIP and the CDC. So they are following federal recommendations. However, there are different recommendations that are out there, and each state has chosen to prioritize slightly differently. So if you have friends or family in other states, you may hear, well, I'm able to get vaccinated. I'm 65 years old and I can go ahead and get vaccinated now. Well, in South Dakota, we're following different guidelines than some of those other states. Yeah, and this is a new slide from the Health Department, and it looks very similar to previous slides. This one changed yesterday slightly, and it is a terrific graphic for helping to understand when you might be up in the schedule to be vaccinated. So along the left-hand side are the phases 1A through 1E, and then on into phase 2. Phase 2 is when vaccine is available to everyone. And it's not expected to be at that point in this process until at least May. It is going to take a while to get through these various phases, and the limitation here is supply. So as supply increases, we will be able to get through these different priorities more quickly. Currently here at the end of January, we're vaccinating people in groups 1A and 1C. Those are healthcare workers. In 1A, frontline healthcare workers, and also long-term care facility workers. And then 1B was done by Walgreens and CVS. They went into nursing homes and assisted living facilities across the state and vaccinated the residents in those facilities. 1C is emergency medical services, other healthcare workers, public health workers, and a number of other people. And for the most part, we are completed through phase 1C. There are a few people that haven't been vaccinated yet or initially chose not to be vaccinated and but are now deciding to be vaccinated. But we needed to move into that next phase, 1D, before getting completely done and having the very last person in 1C. Inside of 1D are people 65 years of age and older, also teachers, funeral service workers, and a few other patients that would be in that 1D space. Now, there are an estimated 265,000 people in that particular group inside of the state. And up until last week, the state was receiving about 11,000 doses of vaccine. And so this is one of the driving reasons for the health department making the decision to open up just a subset of the 1D group. And so the subset that they chose to include were people 80 years of age and older, high-risk patients that are on dialysis, have had an organ transplant, or are getting treatment for cancer currently. One final group in that is high-risk residents in congregate settings. And so that's a much smaller group to be vaccinated, but there are still plenty of people in that group that do need to be vaccinated over the course of the next few weeks before we move on to another subset. So it's anticipated to be in this group at least for a while. Sometime in February, the health department will open up more of 1D, but it is unknown which group that they will decide to go ahead and include. By April, we should be in group 1E, which is fire service personnel, as well as critical infrastructure workers. In that group, there are an estimated 225,000 people. So again, that's a very large group to be vaccinated in the future. This is a slide of current state through last Saturday, the 23rd of January. And Monument Health had received through that time 14,200 vaccine doses. Out of those doses, 1,340 were sent to healthcare facilities that are outside of Monument Health. These are healthcare facilities that are in Hot Springs, in Phillip, in Martin, and a few other areas in western South Dakota. And we at Monument Health don't have good visibility on how many of those doses have been utilized. But out of the doses that were retained inside of Monument Health are 12,860 total doses. And through last Saturday, 10,421 had been administered. That's a percentage of over 80. So over 80% of the doses that were available to Monument Health through last Saturday had been administered. And that number of doses, that 20% that hasn't been administered, are held in reserve to be given as second doses for people who have already received their first doses. So effectively, 100% of the doses that have been provided to Monument Health have been given to patients by the end of that week that they're allotted to us. The number of unique people that have been vaccinated through last Saturday is 9,264. Different people have been vaccinated up to that point. That does not include residents of nursing homes that were vaccinated by CVS and Walgreens. So there's probably 11,000, 12,000 people that have received vaccination in western South Dakota, which is terrific news for us, and especially in that long-term care group that's been vaccinated, since that's the group that has made up about 50% of our hospitalizations since the pandemic began back in March. Monument Health is employing a parallel approach to patients that have a connection into Monument Health or employees that have a connection into Monument Health versus people that don't have any connection inside of Monument Health. So as we opened up, the health department allowed us to vaccinate people in Group 1C. We really felt that the very top of that Group 1C were urgent care workers and providers. So when the health department allowed that to take place, we vaccinated urgent care workers inside Monument Health at the very same time that we vaccinated urgent care workers outside of Monument Health. So we have Rapid City Medical Center and Black Hills Urgent Care that are in the area with no real connection into Monument Health, and their workers were vaccinated at the same time that our urgent care workers were vaccinated. Currently, we have locations vaccinating in Rapid City, Spearfish, Sturgis, Deadwood, Custer, Phillip, Hot Springs, Martin. We've also done a few in Faith, as well as Belfouche, and now in Buffalo. So we are expanding out further into the western part of South Dakota in order to complete more vaccinations.
A COVID-19 vaccine online waiting list is now available through Monument Health. To sign up, go to vaccineregister.monument.health. Those who qualify to receive the vaccine right away will be contacted as appointments open up each week. Individuals who are not yet eligible to schedule appointments are still encouraged to fill out the form now. When you do become eligible for the vaccine, you will be called to schedule your appointment. For more information, go to monument.health/COVID-vaccine.
So in summary, this process is going to take several months for us to complete. Also, everyone is going to have an opportunity to be vaccinated. All your friends, family, loved ones will have an opportunity to be vaccinated inside of this process. There are numerous variables at play. Lots goes into this. One of those main variables is the supply of vaccine. If that supply of vaccine increases, we will be able to get through these phases a lot more quickly. Also, uptake is a variable. If there are fewer people that choose to be vaccinated, we will be able to get through these groupings a lot more quickly. Now, that's not something we're recommending. We really desire that everybody be vaccinated, but it's just a fact in that if the uptake is lower, we will be able to get through these groups more quickly. The state is going to continue to guide this entire process. They have since the beginning, and they will continue to do this, and we will follow the guidelines that the state establishes. And then finally, please be patient with us as we walk through the steps to complete all of these priorities. In the state of South Dakota, we've been very organized so far. We haven't seen long lines of people waiting to be vaccinated. We haven't seen a lot of frustrations here, and we hope to continue to do this and keep this process very organized. So with that, I will complete the forum for today. Thank you.